This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 185 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, as he always is, my good friend and good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, we are about to undertake yet another review of Static Shock as we continue here in our month of Static, abbreviated month of Static reviews here. But excited as we have couple of returning characters that have been some of our favorites as we've gone through these new re-reviews.
That's right. It's the long-awaited return of Carmen Dillo. Since last Saturday, have we talked about him? And he's back this week. But yes, you are of course actually referring to both Rubberband Man and of course the biggest bad in the world of Static, that being Ebon, both returning this week in the aptly titled episode Bad Stretch.
That is right, and we have a fun one to talk about today. I quite enjoyed this one, so I'm excited to see if you have the same amount of enjoyment as I did. So before we do that, though, we will of course have our unsponsored IMDb synopsis segment here for this episode, which originally debuted back on March the 22nd. 2002, meaning, Liam, we are coming up just in a few months now, I guess a quarter of a year away now from the 20-year anniversary. So we technically 19 years old is this episode here.
That's right. And of course, this is the synopsis for Bad Stretch, which was written by Dwayne McDuffie, directed by Joe Sikda, with music by Derek Thornton and animation by Coco. And that synopsis reads as such: Rubberband Man is released from prison a changed man, but family trouble causes the public to question his actions. They got a little too cute with that one. That doesn't really explain anything.
you know, if you think about it, though, it's at least you're not spoiling the entire episode. There's no fake news in that. You know, there's no alluding to certain characters that aren't the characters that they turn out to be, or what have you. Like we had issues with last week. There's no worms that are actually amoebas. So, yeah, it's not great. Like I'd give it like a C grade.
Fair enough. Yeah, but I guess we can jump into plot here. But yeah, we have an interesting episode, as was sort of touched on in the last time we saw Rubberband Man in this series. Of course, the episode Bent Out of Shape, which we reviewed previously, and you can hear that review, of course, anytime you'd like at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast or on the Pod Tower YouTube channel. But we had last seen Rubberband Man attempting in some way to make up for his past evil deeds, and had seemingly was trying to turn over a new leaf by the end of that previous episode. And we kind of pick up right where we left off there, as he's now seemingly served his time fully, is back out in public, and is still dating Virgil's sister. So lots of combustible elements, as one might say here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have a sort of familiar superhero trope. Anytime there's a villain that turns, that apparently is reformed, the superhero, your hero of the show, typically, as we've seen both in Batman and Superman episodes in the past, the hero sort of has to play the suspect. Not quite trusting and not convinced that the villain has turned over a new leaf. So Static does that, but instead of his motivation just being that the villain is not quite yet reformed, his motivation seems to be more out of jealousy, which is an interesting little twist on that, I felt. He's a little bit envious over the fact that Rubberband Man's getting a lot of press. Not only is Rubberband Man receiving the praise from from the police officers that arrive on the scene as he foils Shiv, Talon, and the new character that we can talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about in visuals and eventually in voice acting, but Aqua Maria, as she is known, Aqua Maria, the three of them have been foiled, and Rubberband Man is again sort of involved in suppressing them, and specifically this new character, actor Aqua Maria. He begins getting praise not only from the cops but also from the press.
What do you think you're doing with that money? Returning it to the police. Thanks, Rubberband Man. Okay. What's wrong with this picture?
Nothing. I did my time. Now I'm one of the good guys. Like you.
There's a stretch. It's true. Ever since he got out of jail last month, he's been helping us.
And we appreciate it, too. Not that we don't appreciate your help, Static.
Yeah. Nice try, guy.
Hey, Rubberband Man! Quick, get a picture over here!
Don't you want to get in the pictures?
For what? He's the big hero.
He's getting lots of fans, and we see him later on. He's in the middle of a mall, and there's a lot of young ladies that are attempting to get his autograph and swoon over him. And there's the classic confusion where, on the other line or on the other end of the phone, as Rubberband Man is getting chased by this group of young women. Virgil's sister happens to hear it, and she assumes the worst about him, because why wouldn't you think the worst about the guy, I guess, who still trying to date you even though he just got out of prison? That's fine. Like, yeah, sure. Like that makes perfect sense. There's immediately some combustible elements there that take place, and as we kind of roll along here, pun intended, as we continue. Yes, Carmen Dillo does make another appearance here. I was so pleased.
Yes,
we did not have to wait too long to see yet another appearance from maybe my new favorite Static Rogue, Carmen Dillo here. But so he, along with Shiv and Talon, decide they're going to break into an electronics store and sort of wreak havoc and steal some things and steal money. And they are joined shortly thereafter as Rubberband Man and Static show up once again to the scene. They are joined by the leader of their group, of course, that being Ebon. And there's an immediate sort of conflict taking place between Ebon and Rubberband Man that sort of alludes to them knowing each other, but it's sort of left in the dark, pun intended, as to just what exactly their relationship is, at least at first.
Yeah, Static's not quite aware what to make of things. It's not quite clear. There is a scene a little bit earlier in the episode where Ebon is sort of made aware that Rubberband Man helps Static take down Aqua Maria and the other meta breed, and sort of goes into a rage, and he goes and sees Rubberband Man at his apartment, and we get a feeling very quickly that they know each other really well, and that they obviously they call each other by their real names, Adam and Ivan, which I don't think we knew Ebon's real name before this episode, so that's kind of a fun little wrinkle here. But it immediately sets up that they are, in fact, as we come to find out, they are brothers, and we get a little bit more of that later in the episode of, their father had passed away, and then Ebon had kind of taken on that role or at least in his mind had taken on the role of being the protector and the man of the family, and sort of his version of that was to sort of seize power and to sort of take what he wants, and he wants his brother to join the family business.
After all I've done for you, this is the payback? When Dad passed away... Don't you mention him. Why not? I'm the man of the family now. Says who? That's the way it works. We're blood. I'm supposed to be looking after you, not fighting with...
Did someone say fight? No offense, Stretch, but a big-time supervillain like Ebon requires a big-time superhero like me.
Shut this, Static.
Wait, the light makes him lose his powers. You're blocking it.
Thanks, little brother.
Get off him. He'll get away.
I'm sorry about that.
You wanted him to escape.
Yeah. It's he's trying to recruit him back to it, and it's sort of, very typical of a villain trying to sway him back to the dark side. And in a way, he uses his past against him, which is pretty poetic and dastardly thing to do. Trying to convince Rubberband Man that he'll never be accepted, he'll always be seen as the bad guy. And they're having this confrontation in the electronics store, Static breaks in and begins exposing Ebon to the fluorescent lighting. He kind of whatever. It's hard, as we've talked about before. They kind of just let Static's powers do whatever they want them to do. As we learn in this episode, also, as Static not only discovers a new power that he can do, but also at some point his electricity allows him to have super hearing on top of it too.
He can hear electricity and also radio waves, I guess, because he picks up like a police band at one point.
Yeah, that was a new power that he developed for this episode, and I'm curious if we ever hear, pun intended, from it again. But yes. So as Static is sort of using his powers to shine the bright lights of the fluorescent bulbs from this store onto Ebon, and he begins to melt, then Rubberband Man sort of steps in and shields him from it in a very impulsive moment. And this allows Ebon to escape, and Static uses this as the thing to point out at this point that he believes that Rubberband Man has truly not reformed and is just returning to his old ways. And unfortunately, this also has been captured on the store's closed circuit television and been shared with the news, who begins to play it. And then, people start turning against him at that point. All the while, the rest, as you said, of the meta breed is captured and is sent to prison. And there's a mysterious breakout that occurs concurrently with all of this happening. And it appears that Rubberband Man is behind the breakout of the meta breed, as we get a shot of the guard and the security guard in the prison being attacked by somebody that certainly appears to be Rubberband Man. This, of course, sends the police to his apartment. Suddenly he's public enemy number one. And wouldn't you know it, Ebon takes this time to sort of attempt to make him yet another offer that he can't refuse.
Yeah, it is interesting because there's a little bit of I felt like there was a little bit of commentary here about like how hard it can be to like rejoin society after you've been to prison. Like obviously we know Static Shock's to show that it does not shy away from dealing with those kind of social issues in the past, but they don't hit it over it doesn't get into the very special episode territory. But I did feel like they were kind of there's a point where when Ebon takes Rubberband Man back to the hideout at the end to kind of give him that final sales pitch, where he just says, once they see you as a criminal, they never see you as anything else. And it does seem like Rubberband Man isn't boxed in, not necessarily. Now he did obviously choose to let Ebon escape in the store, but he hasn't necessarily gone back to his evil ways in any other way. But so you see his internal struggle, both with trying to go straight in the sense of seeking justice and helping people, but also sort of dealing with this bond that he feels that he sort of owes his older brother. And they sort of have it out, though. We'll get to the kind of the final scene in a minute here, but yeah, that's sort of that feeling that blood sort of trumps all, and that he can't quite bring himself to take down his brother, which leads him to then being, as we find out when Static arrives at the hideout at the end here, that Rubberband Man was in fact framed by Ebon, who was able to, I guess, make a spare suit and pose as Rubberband Man to break the rest of the meta breed out of prison. And then we get our final battle as Ebon tries to kill Static, but Rubberband Man saves him, and And then
we kind of split off. He saves him from being teleported into a volcano, which we're not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how Ebon's powers exactly work. We know that he like teleports and phases in and out of another dimension, but how far do his powers work? Like, is this like he can just teleport them anywhere on Earth, or are we to believe that somewhere in Dakota there is an active volcano present that he could just teleport him into?
Maybe Dakota is in Hawaii. We don't know. Or Corto Maltese, or
it's just true. Yes.
What's the island where Doomsday and Superman fight? San Vaccaro.
There you go.
Maybe it's somewhere. It's close to San. I don't know. I am interested in this because he doesn't just make portals. Like he himself is the portal.
Right.
So like, which is interesting. But then the limits of it, because he makes a portal in a wall and takes him from like near Virgil's house to immediately back to this like abandoned like circus tent that they're hiding out in. I think it's supposed to be like a Chucky.
I would say yes, definitely a stand-in for Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah. So which we see a little bit later in some of in Static's sort of final battle with the rest of the meta breed here. But yes, as the Rubberband Man saves Static from being thrown into a pit of lava, they sort of square up, and Ebon flees, and Rubberband Man goes after him, while Static is left to deal with the rest of the meta breed. And we'll get into more of the specifics of that fight probably in visuals and animation in a minute here. But Static's able to use his various powers, including his he has this big piece of metal wire that he uses to blind them at one point. And then he also runs an electric current through Aqua Maria, which turns her back into hydrogen, which is just a cloud, which then rains her back down. I don't know about all of that from a scientific perspective, but it was interesting. Like I said, we'll talk more about it in visuals. But yeah, Static takes down all the rest of the meta breed, and meanwhile, Rubberband Man and Ebon kind of have this one final verbal sparring before they finally come to blows. And Ebon once again tries to sort of appeal to Rubberband Man's loyalty and tells him that blood's thicker than water, and Rubberband Man just tells him that right and wrong is thicker than blood, and he finally sort of makes that choice and chooses to stop Ebon from escaping. And he and Static kind of come to an understanding here as we begin to wrap it up. And then we get one final little scene of Adam, as his Rubberband Man's civilian identity is known, returning to the Hawkins household, where he has a little brief discussion with Virgil before realizing that he's still in a little bit of trouble with Sharon, but he's willing to work on it. So that we sort of get our happy ending and a nice little bow on things here.
I guess we can look into our scores here. I really enjoyed this episode. Like I said at the top of the program, I think it's a fun 22 minutes. I love the little bait and switch that they did, where you think that Rubberband Man, you as the viewer kind of are on that side of believing that, there's no way that the Rubberband Man could have turned over a new leaf. I will just say that I was pleasantly surprised that Rubberband Man continues to fight on the side of good, and it's nice to have a story where the villain does reform. We didn't quite get that in Batman the Animated Series, where any of the villains truly turned over a new leaf and ended up being an actual ally to Batman. We don't really see that in Superman either. So that's a different storytelling technique, that that change is possible, and that it is possible to change your ways and to come to a decision to be a different human being. And and that your mistakes shouldn't define your past mistakes shouldn't necessarily define you for the rest of your life. So I love that. I love the whole Ebon and Rubberband Man sort of the reveal of them being related and them having this interaction. We'll get into visuals in a little bit, but there's a lot to enjoy in this episode. I like that Static's whole thing was more jealous of the attention or that it seemed like that was a lot of his motivation, as opposed to just not believing the character could be good, because that kind of, to me, lends to him being a younger character, to wanting the focus and wanting the attention. He's still a teenager, so he's more focused on that or using that as his motivation for not believing Rubberband Man. I don't feel like they necessarily resolved that at the end though. Like there's he doesn't quite admit like, hey, I should have believed you, or hey, sorry, my jealousy got in the way of seeing that you were a good guy after all. There is that one moment where they sort of have a heart to heart and he goes to high five him and, Batman raises his hand, but it didn't feel quite like an admission of, feeling like he was owning it all the way. So still a very strong episode. I ended up with an 8 out of 10 for plot. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it the exact same score. I really enjoyed this. I liked it as you said. It's both interesting to see how Static reacts to having a new superhero that's getting this praise, and there's even a moment where Richie asks him, is it because you think he's really, is that your jealousy talking, or is it because you really think he's turned evil? And Virgil sort of admits, yeah, probably both. Like he's sort of aware of his own bias or his own frustrations with Rubberband Man getting a little bit of the spotlight, and then I think sort of feeling a little bit justified when Rubberband Man helps Ebon escape and not really understanding the reason for it, and then finally at the end there, between Rubberband Man saving his life from the lava, just in case we forgot to mention that, and then kind of having that heart to heart once he's aware that they're brothers. That's that kind of turns things around for Static. And if I guess the make good is a little bit more of him talking to him as Virgil at the end there, when he, like as you said, when he kind of encourages Rubberband Man to continue on, and that he sort of believes in him, because Static believes in him, just kind of reinforcing that he is sort of part of the team now and is welcome as a hero in the city. And it's a fun episode, and it's fun to see a character that we've talked about a couple times as a villain take that turn as a hero, and not to have it undone and go back to the status quo by the end here. He's not just back to being a villain by the end and is a villain, when we see him for the rest of the series, he is a good guy now. He is a hero for the rest of the series from here on out. So it is cool to kind of have that character arc, as he started out as just a straight up villain with sort of this personal vendetta, and then kind of see his evolution from here to where we find him today. And and this isn't really a knock against this episode so much, but I do wish we had seen more Ebon and Rubberband Man interactions in the series going forward. I think that's kind of an interesting rivalry to set up. But they don't really do much else with the fact that they're related. I'm not even sure if it's ever mentioned again. So I wish that I guess
according to the DCAU wiki, it is it's not mentioned after this episode. So
right. So so like I wish we gotten more with it. So and maybe that's even more of a compliment to this episode than a detriment. That I liked it so much. I wish we could have seen like a follow-up about that. But overall, I think a really good episode. It's a good character growth episode, not just for Rubberband Man, but for Static and for Virgil too. So there's a lot of good stuff. And we always talk about how we want our characters to be in a different place than they were when the episode started. And this episode definitely qualifies for that.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Lots of fun. And as you said, character development, that's always huge in enjoying the episode as a whole. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category for the week. And that, of course, is going to be animation and visuals. I believe Coco is responsible for this week's animation. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, I was for a season 2 Static episode, which we've talked about before. You can hear certainly in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. But a lot of the early first and second season Static episodes, didn't have the more modernized, better, cell shaded looking animation. This episode sort of, I feel like, has a combination between the two, because you have the two characters that they actually tended to do actual cell shading on, which was Ebon and Rubberband Man. So I feel like this episode maybe maybe my favorite visual looking episode that we've covered so far for these first 2 seasons. It's a very strong, fun visual episode. And I think most of the characters look very on model. I will take this time, by the way, to say Carmen Dillo, who we mentioned last week, my new favorite character honestly, a Mr. Wing Carmen Dillo buddy comedy would be, I'd sign up for that in a second. I'm just going to throw that out there into the universe. If
there's a space for like a Legion of Doom animal villains in the DCAU with Carmen Dillo, Ferret, Mr. Wing, Croc. Like, there's a lot we could draw.
Gorilla Grodd. We got him.
Grodd, of course.
We got him.
Yeah.
Man, this is our best idea.
Cheetah.
Here we go. 185 episodes in, and we have our best idea to date. All right, book it. TMCR. Call us, Warner Brothers. Anyway, okay, back to this. Anyway, Carmen Dillo definitely gives me some, based on his design, some spy versus spy vibes from Mad Magazine back in the day. Not just the eyes either, with the Joker, New Batman Adventures eyes with the black outlines with the white irises, but also his general face shape is that pointy. If you don't know what spy versus spy is, Google it. If you're our age and you're listening to this podcast, which is most of the people that listen to our podcast, probably know what spy versus spy is. So, but yeah, some spy versus spy vibes coming from Carmen Dillo here, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had with of course Rubberband Man being a stretchy guy, and then on top of it having Ebon with very similar looking powers in the way that they both move. His being slightly different, of course, with the portals and the way that he sort of shape shifts out of the shadows and appears in different scenes. But I had a lot of fun with the visuals in this week.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. I think all of the various meta breed characters get at least kind of a moment to shine. Aquamaria, I think, immediately stands out as like a kind of a different level of cool from, we have our animal characters, we have Shiv, but we have her who's this like kind of translucent. She's kind of constantly moving because she's sort of made of water. So there's kind of a constant flow, no pun intended, to her movements throughout this episode, and the way just that first fight scene on like the football field where Rubberband Man kind of encases her after she sort of attacked Static and been able to sort of short him out. And I really enjoyed Aquamaria, especially in this episode, as far as standouts in the meta breed. But yeah, I think that the various shape-shifting transformations that we see from Rubberband Man and of course from Ebon are really cool. And despite them not necessarily making a ton of sense or having a questionable scientific application, I like all of Static's wacky new powers that he has in this episode.
Yeah, as we've already said, there's definitely some odd things. The Nova burst that we get in the it's of course alluded to in the very first scene as he and Richie are sitting there discussing, and Richie sort of develops. Did he give a cool catchy name for this tracker thing, the Static logo tracker thing?
I think there is a name for it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
All right, tweet us or leave it in the comments of the post on Instagram, because both of us are too involved in our description here of the Nova Blast or Nova Burst. Which I immediately was like, all right, well, so this is going to come into play later on in the episode, because you have to set the table for this in order for this to be a thing later on. And I don't feel like it quite did what I thought it was going to do. I sort of pictured it being, if you are a fan or ever watched the early 90s Marvel Fantastic Four cartoon, there was an episode where Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, developed that he had a supernova blast that he could go like supernova, and there's a whole episode around that, and that's exactly what this reminded me of. I was like, oh, so he's got to go supernova at the end in order to defeat Ebon or something like that. But
Chekhov's supernova electric wire trick.
Right, exactly. So he sort of does it, but it's used more to animate these animatronic mice that we already mentioned are kind of stand-ins for Chuck E. Cheese. So he apparently this can make animatronic mice come to life and then grip the members of the meta breed and shock them through it. So he uses his powers to do that and to scare away, of course, Carmen Dillo, who is just trying to get out of the gang at this point. He said, poor dude. I'm telling you, the dude needs to open up his Shawarmadillo TMCR. I did enjoy also Shiv, who is, as I've said in the past, probably my least favorite character based on his voice casting. But I did appreciate the fact that instead of just using like laser armed swords this time, he uses a couple more constructs. So he actually uses a baseball bat to whack Rubberband Man at one point, who's bouncing around. I thought that was pretty clever. And of course, we get Talon, who's a huge important part of that scene where they're in the electronics store. She seems to have gotten the best of Static, but then Static finds a pair of headphones, pre-Beats era headphones, by the way, wireless headphones, and manages to figure out how to allow her sonic screen to go into these microphones that then sort of give all this feedback off throughout the entire sound systems and TVs. And I thought that was a neat little trick that he pulled there. And then he tops it off with a nod to Batman. Of course, this occurring before he's actually ever met the Dark Knight, but he says, "Oh, Batman would have had real earplugs."
This is after.
After
the first one?
That's
the
right.
Batman and Robin.
Okay.
Joker gives
Yeah. All right, that's true. So he gives the shout out to Batman there. So that I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, there's I like that scene in the electronics store too. I think there's some really fun stuff again with first the bad guys kind of wreaking havoc in various ways, and Talon busting open all the cash registers with her scream, and then Static and Rubberband Man fighting against them. And then I think Static used that same trick in another episode against Ebon, but that thing where he like overloads the fluorescent lighting to weaken Ebon. I think that's pretty cool. So it was cool to see him bring that back. And that final fight between Rubberband Man and Ebon there at the end, where they're all just kind of stretching and moving around each other and kind of intertwining the whole time because they're powers are so similar, and then Rubberband Man kind of just turns himself into a balloon and stretches himself so wide that the Ebon can't quite keep up and sort of is incapacitated. I think that's a fun kind of final beat there, and again, I always like an Ebon episode. Although, as you mentioned, as we have now found out, his teleporting power is that powerful. I once again must ask, where was his invite to the secret society? Like I understand why you don't want Shiv or Ferret, but like Ebon should have gotten a seat at the table if like Angle Man was there, right?
Correct. Yes, especially if he's as powerful as and you couldn't use any of the Batman villains. The Batman villains were on an embargo, so the creators couldn't use them. But there was some in-universe reason why none of the Batman villains were invited. So if you're not going to have the Batman villains, there maybe there was some sort of bias against people that have interacted with Batman, although Ebon didn't. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like Goldface. If Goldface gets an invitation, I feel like Ebon should have. But anyway, there's some really cool stuff throughout this episode, as we've talked about, and for all those reasons, I gave visuals a very strong 8 out of 10.
Yep, I am right there with you. I also gave it an 8 out of 10. It's a lot of fun, and I think the final battle between Ebon and Rubberband Man is very fun. All of their interactions together are really great. Just the way that Rubberband Man moves and the various different things. Again, we see in this episode what we asked the last time we saw him, which is his suit his skin, or is his skin his suit? We're not sure, but he's able to transform the suit into looking like a hat and a t-shirt and jeans, and also then like a full morph suit also. So we don't know. But we also know that Ebon, that Ebon at one point has a suit that's just a suit. So I will also say that I did find it hilarious that Static happens to enter into this tent to sort of find out what's happening in the final scene here, and just happens to stumble upon the one place that Ebon, the guy that can transport things and places anywhere, decided to just hide this suit in the ceiling of the circus tent. Like, that's the one he didn't decide to destroy the rubber suit in case this plan of framing Rubberband Man backfired on him. He could have teleported the suit into the volcano, but no, he's gonna hide it in his hideout ceiling, and Static also just happens to stumble upon it. But anyway, funniness going on there. But yes, lots of stuff that we enjoyed nonetheless as far as visuals are concerned. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And we are firmly in season 2, as opposed to last week's early on in season 1. So that means that we have lots of music in this episode, almost a distractingly large amount. I will say, however, I'm a huge critic of the music for Static, as anybody who's listened to this podcast knows. However, I will say I really dug the Ebon theme song, which gave me all sorts of, and I had to look up the date on when these songs originated. It gives me the tune reminds me of Soulja Boy Crank That. Soulja Boy Crank That came out 5 years after this episode came out. So if anything, Soulja Boy Crank That ripped the tune off from Ebon's theme in Static Shock. You heard it here first.
Derek Thornton, the composer, is might be owed some back royalties here. But I also really dug the Ebon theme, just because we always talk about that with Batman, and even with some of the Superman episodes and stuff. There, that memorable refrain that plays kind of every time he comes into the scene, and then it's played a little more ominous when he confronts Rubberband Man after Rubberband Man leaves the Hawkins house, and he kind of feels like he has nowhere to go, and Ebon kind of creeps up on him to once again asks him to join the crew. I really like that Ebon theme, and there's like some really like I feel like it's real bass heavy at the start of the episode, from Virgil and Richie in the abandoned gas station to that first fight scene, and then we get the classic Static fight music as we are accustomed to hearing, with that season 2 main theme mixed in for a lot of the action beats there, especially at the end there when he reveals the supernova power to blind everybody and create the air to bring the animatronics to life and such. So a lot of good stuff I thought this week, and I settled on a pretty strong 7 out of 10 for music.
I went with a 6 out of 10. I do think that the song "This Is How We Roll," playing, not to be confused with the Florida Georgia Line song "This Is How We Roll." This is how we roll. This is how we roll. This is how we roll, I believe is the words to this song. At playing as Carmen Dillo is literally rolling around. I was not a fan of this tune. I will say that the words, as always, very distracting for me. However, Ebon's theme, loved it. Hopefully, when we get more episodes in the future, we maybe hear this call back to this theme, because it's a pretty dope theme. I liked it. It's memorable. As I said, it gives me. I thought, I was like, oh, did they just rip off the Soulja Boy song? And then like that. Okay, that's interesting, because we've already talked about different homages, and how a lot of times the music seems to be just knockoff versions of popular hip hop songs or rap songs at the time. But hey, give them credit. They came up with a pretty memorable tune here, and it worked out. So compared to most weeks when we grade the music for this show, I'd say that's a pretty high mark for me. Is 2 weeks in a row here we've done. I think I've given it a 6 out of 10. So
I mean, it's no Kangor theme, but it's pretty good.
Ugh. All right. Moving on. Our final category of the day, Liam, is going to be our voice actors. So we have a pretty large cast because we have the whole meta breed involved here and multiple superheroes and Static's whole family. So let's get into our voice actors for this week.
That's right. So we have the meta breed. We'll deal with the kind of ancillary members and then get to the main event in a little bit here. But we do have Matt Ballard returning as Carmen Dillo. We have Michelle Morgan as Sharon, of course. But we also have we also have Tia Texada as Talon. We have Brian Tochi as Shiv and making her debut. And I think Aquamaria does come back in a later episode, though I think she's voiced by somebody else. So this is Erica Velez's only turn as Aquamaria here. So the hench people, or the B team here of the meta breed, maybe they don't get a ton of stuff to do, but there's still some good comedy. As you mentioned, Matt Ballard as Carmen Dillo kind of throughout the whole episode isn't quite sure he really wants to be in the meta breed, and like he seems kind of put upon by the whole thing, and he's sort of regretting it every time Static or Rubberband Man kind of shows up to foil them, and then by the end he's really sure he wants out. So I think there's some, even though it's kind of not a ton for any of those folks to do, I do think there's some fun comedy from the meta breed here.
Carmen Dillo is the standout. Duh.
Yeah, like I said, he's quite a bit of fun with his sort of constant just being sort of exasperated by the whole situation. Yeah, Matt Ballard as Carmen Dillo does a pretty good job there. But elsewhere in our cast, of course, we have Jason Marsden as Richie briefly. I saw Kevin Michael Richardson is credited. I don't remember Virgil's dad being in the episode. Was I out to lunch? Did he make an appearance here?
Yeah, it's just it's for a brief second when they're watching the news, when after Rubberband Man makes the first save and he's being lauded on the news, and they're watching the TV during dinner, and he says literally no TV during dinner. So and makes them turn off the television. So
that's right.
It's a very brief appearance.
That is correct. You are right there. Should also mention, considering who it is, we have a newscaster who we hear from a couple of times in this episode. Once again, played by, of course, the great Maria Canals, who, of course, is most famously the voice of Hawk Girl, but lots of other work to her credit as well. But just fun to have that little like vocal cameo there. And then we have our main villains. Our villain turned hero and our main villain. We have Kadeem Hardison once again returning as Rubberband Man / Adam, and Gary Sturgis once again returning as Ivan / Ebon. And the thing that stood out to me in Ebon, and then I saw it once again mentioned in the fantastic DCAU wiki page to confirm that I was not crazy, is that in this episode, and apparently only in this appearance for Ebon, they put some kind of like echo reverby effect on his voice. And like it's not terrible or anything, but I think it just stood out to me because it's never there before in the episodes we've covered from season 1, and then we've seen him at least once in the newer season, in season 3, and he didn't have it there, so it is kind of distracting. I don't know if they were trying to better sort of separate him from Rubberband Man as far as he's like more of a like monstrous character or something. Like I'm not quite sure what the idea was there, but it did stick out to me because he has such that, as we've talked about 100 times, he's kind of doing a pretty obvious like Ice-T impression and doing it very well, and he's a great menacing villain, but that extra little effect thrown on the voice there, I just kind of found it a little bit distracting. Again, not it could have been fine if it was there every other time, but just that extra little I just felt it was a little bit unneeded, I guess.
Allow me to introduce the newest member of the meta breed, my brother, Rubberband Man.
I never said I was joining any gang.
I don't see where you have a choice, Adam. Once they slap that bad guy label on you, they never change their minds.
It still doesn't make sense. Why do they think I'm the one who broke you guys out of jail?
Here's a clue and a half for you, Stretchy. You've been
Yeah, correct
framed.
me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we sort of clamored for that initially. I mean, we'd have to go back and listen to the episodes in the archives, but I'm fairly certain that was one of the things that when you have those big, larger than life sort of scary looking characters, sometimes having a slight voice effect on them creates that illusion that they're more menacing or they're more deadly to the hero. So yeah, I think if it was consistently across the board, I honestly didn't notice it until the final scene where he's sort of sitting on the throne under the stand-in for Chuck E. Cheese tent and sort of talking about the plan that he's revealed. I was like, man, there's an echo in his voice. That's weird. I don't remember that being there before. And then, again, reading up on it, it's like, oh no, this is the only episode that features that. It's interesting. I think if it, like you said, if it had been there across the board, you wouldn't have noticed it. It would have been acceptable, but because it stands out and because his voice, is so recognizable and we've talked so much about it, it does sort of stand out to us, especially when you're listening to it with that more critique, critical sounding ear. So yeah,
I think for the most part, vocal effects notwithstanding, I think he does a really good job being kind of the devil on the shoulder of Rubberband Man in this episode, both sort of appealing to him emotionally, and then as we talked about in plot a little bit earlier, that he sort of also makes that appeal to him that the public's never going to accept you, they're never going to let you be anything but a criminal. So he kind of comes at him from two different angles, where he's trying to get him to be a little bit more sympathetic to him because they're related, because of their father passing away, but at the same time he's also just trying to, I guess, kind of be more of a realist with his little brother here, and telling him that that this is the meta breed's kind of his only option because he's always going to be a criminal just like him, and he should just kind of lean into it. So I think he does a really good job as again, the vocal thing is a little weird, but overall performance wise, I think Gary Sturgis here does another fine job as the villainous Ebon. And I think Kadeem Hardison, he does have that very kind of understated delivery on a lot of his stuff, but I think where he kind of shines is in that final scene when he and Ebon are kind of going back and forth.
This ain't no way to treat a brother. Don't hand me that brother stuff. You played me, Ivan. Come on, blood is thicker than water. And right and wrong are thicker than blood.
Always could take him.
I'm sorry you had to.
Yeah, he had it coming. I ain't giving up on him, though. I changed my ways, so can he.
Thanks for saving me from the lava pool.
You cleared my name. We're even. High five?
Not funny.
Is too.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. I think that final line that he delivers about good and evil being more important than blood, or good versus evil is more important than blood, being thicker than water. It's yeah, absolutely. That I love that. I thought, I believed that they were two family members sort of struggling over this thing and having this rivalry. So yeah, I did absolutely believe that. And I thought that he really shined through with that final scene there. And even in trying to appeal and sort of going through this crisis of nobody really ready to believe that he's turned over this new leaf. And even the moments where he's sitting there, trying to figure out why people in the scene before, where he's kind of having this crisis, and struggling with, does he turn to evil simply because nobody else will believe that he is capable of being better. I do love those little conversations that he gets to have with Ebon. So yeah, I think it's a very strong performance from everybody, and Static is, interestingly, I feel like takes the back seat for the majority of this episode. Phil LaMarr doesn't have the lion's share that he seems to usually have for an episode of Static.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we do end up spending more time with Kadeem Hardison's Rubberband Man than we do with Static in this episode, as you said. So we get him sort of reacting to a lot of stuff, as we mentioned, the sort of initial jealousy that he feels, and then sort of that sort of righteous indignation that he sort of feels when he thinks that Rubberband Man has gone back to his evil ways, and then kind of having to admit at the end a little bit that he was wrong, and that Rubberband Man did the right thing, and that he's sort of proud to have him on the team. And yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a minor thing there, and we get a little bit of him, of course, interacting with Michelle Morgan as Sharon, and Jason Marsden as Richie. But yeah, it's mostly just he's mostly there to kind of facilitate the action scenes and then just kind of react to it. But yeah, he is very much a secondary character in this episode, and I mean, still obviously a good job. Nobody better in this type of role than Phil LaMarr as Static here. But yeah, not as much for him to maybe sink his teeth into from a character standpoint today. So overall, I think everybody's pretty darn good throughout this episode. So another strong 8 out of 10 for my voice score.
Wow. Yeah, I went with the same exact score. I went with an 8 out of 10. So only one category did we really differ on. But yeah, I think overall everybody does a really strong job, and for having such a large cast, and at times it's felt like some of the people that they brought in to guest or to do certain voices sometimes maybe were detrimental in some ways, and maybe brought the score down a little bit. But this really feels like here, as you're kind of winding down season 2, that the entire cast and especially the recurring characters are really finding their footing and really finding their chops here, and really clicking together and having good chemistry together. So yeah, I would agree. Pretty strong scores from both of us that reflect that.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam, that will bring us to our final scores for this week. So totaling everything up, I come up with a pretty strong 30 out of 40 for this week's episode. What about you?
That's right. And as you said, Cal, we were only differing on one category, and it was only by 1 point. So I have just a score of 1 point higher, that being a final score of 31 out of 40.
All right. Well, I would say, as we talk about rewatchability here, Liam, where do you land on that?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a big thumbs up, at least a thumbs up and a half, at least for rewatchability here. With it's Rubberband Man isn't necessarily a character important to the overarching DCAU outside of this series. But for Static, not only does it have all these returning characters, it gives us this character development. It's this reveal that these two characters that we've seen before are related, and then it's also Rubberband Man, taking the turn to becoming kind of a full-fledged superhero in his own right here. So yeah, there's a lot here that I think you have to watch if you're watching through Static. This is definitely one you gotta watch the first time, and then I think if you're coming back to Static like we are, I think it's definitely one you got to rewatch.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I think it's a fun one. It doesn't drag. It's a pretty good story. Like I said, I think it's enjoyable to watch. And then, it has some of the best characters that were really developed and fleshed out through the entire series with both Rubberband Man and Ebon. And of course, it's interesting because so often I feel like the episodes that we enjoy the most, we say this a lot, but don't always have your main character as the focus. And a lot of the times we enjoy the storytelling that comes with the development development of these sympathetic characters. And, you know, the Rubberband Man story is a great example that we already touched on of, you know, redemption. Can a human being actually be redeemed from the things that they've done in the past? Like, is that possible? So touching on that and having the real life struggle of, you know, what do you do in those moments when people don't believe that you could possibly be doing the right thing? Do you still do the right thing anyway? Like, those are great themes and great things that were written in here by obviously a slew of great people that developed this series specifically. But in this case, this episode, you know, the late great Dwayne McDuffie, who, you know, clearly knew what he was doing when he's developing and writing these characters so well. So definitely give it a recommendation for Static. Grand scheme of things for DCAU, we've talked about that before. Static stuff, it rarely plays into it in a huge way. But I would say if you're watching Static, if you're looking for an episode of Static to watch, the Ebon episodes typically, and the Rubberband Man ones actually, are really have some good depth to them. So I definitely recommend this.
Agreed.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this week's episode. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app. And if you do subscribe to us there and allows you to leave a review, we would greatly appreciate that. Don't forget, if you listen to us on Spotify, there's some ways that you can interact with us there. We always put up a poll each week about the episode, asking you a question. And then there's ways for you to interact with us on there. You can do that. If you're listening to us on Apple, leave us a 5-star review, if you will, and let us know what you like about the podcast. Leave a little blurb that helps get more ears on the podcast. As Liam mentioned at the top of the program, you can always also listen to us on the Pod Tower on YouTube by subscribing there. That's a way to support us and our friends at the Watchtower Database and Tim Talk, both of who are doing lots of great things. So check those out as well. And then, of course, follow us on social media at DCAU Review on Twitter and on our Instagram. Well, where you probably would have known that this episode was coming up if you did. So, you know, coming up next week, though, we're going to continue here, Liam, with another exciting episode of Static. So let's talk about what episode we'll be covering next week.
That is right. And to wrap up our sort of abbreviated month of Static reviews here, we've got a big one. And in fact, technically, it's a pair of big ones. We got a 2-parter coming next week. And it's a shame that the big leagues had already been taken for a different episode, because this next week the only way to describe it is Static and Richie are being inducted into the big leagues a little bit, as they will be teaming up with not just Batman, but Hawkgirl, Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter. Static and Gear meet the Justice League next week in part adventure, A League of Our Own.
Oh, baby, it's gonna be a big one. It's a Thanksgiving miracle here in the
That's right, my God.
Can't wait to enjoy that with you. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.